All right, everybody. Good morning. So today's topic is designing with the NV series endpoints. We're going to cover a lot of different things. You know, if you have used the NV32 in the past and you're not familiar with any of the other endpoints, this is going to be a great opportunity for you to kind of understand where they fit and how they operate. If you're completely new to the NV series, you know, hopefully you'll get some insight on how each one of those works and how it functions. So there's some interesting nuances to how we do our network video. You know, one of the first things is, you know, this is part of the whole Q-SYS OS, right? So we have, you know, our processors, we have in the other Q-SYS peripheral products, we have all tied into the network. And then we also integrate with, you know, so many of our third-party partners, and everything along the line there. So let's start with the NV32H core capable. This is one of the, we released this product several years back, and when we first released it, what we were seeing from folks is, you know, it had an adoption, and it was released simply as being could be software defined as an encoder or a decoder. And then there was a time where the product manager was mentioned that the processor in it was, you know, had as much processing power as some of the cores that we had, some of the smaller cores. And so we were like, why couldn't it be a core? And they're like, well, I don't know. So I always like to let people know, if you have some really early, those first year NV32s, you'll see the label will just say NV32 on the white label on the back of it, on the top. And if it does not say core capable, then it's not capable of being a core, or it can only be a peripheral. So anyways,
So I hate to interrupt, Stan, but
go ahead.
are you currently sharing content?
Oh, I thought I was, yes.
I think we're having a little issue seeing that.
Oh, shoot. Well, let me try again. I'll stop it. Thank you for saying that.
All right, just
There we
wanted
go.
to make sure
I'll
we're
try it
getting
again.
There we go. All right.
There we go. All right, cool. Well, you guys didn't miss anything. I'll show you. So didn't miss a lot. They were introductory slides. So yeah. So we were just talking about with just a shot of the NV, the Q-SYS OS there. Thank you, Thomas. I'm glad you noticed that. Anyway, so with the NV32, it has the ability to be core capable, or it can be a peripheral. So we'll kind of dive into what each one of those looks like here in the coming slides. So NV32, it's streamlined for integration with Q-SYS. So anything that's in the Q-SYS platform line, we natively add HDMI, and we're able to draw that. We only use, you know, Q-SYS Designer. You drag these components into Q-SYS Designer. Now it's part of your audio system, your video system, and your control system. So we optimize the NV32 for the connected meeting space. When I first looked at for its ability to do 3 1080p HDMIs in and 2 out as a decoder, and 3 in as an encoder, I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. But once I started designing with it, it really makes a lot of sense. And you'll kind of see that in some of the example designs we go through. But the flexibility here is you order one SKU, and it's software definable as either an encoder or a decoder. Let's take a look at the back panel real quick. So on the back panel, starting on the left-hand side at the bottom, it can be powered externally with a local power supply of 48 volt, 1.5 amp. We do have some recommendations on those, as well as it can be powered via PoE. It is 802.3BT Type 4, though. So many other products from our competitors, and actually our NV21, are Type 3, which means they only need 60 watts. So be sure that if you're doing a power injector, PoE injector, that it does provide the full 90 watts and it's Type 4 compatible. Local power, we don't sell a local power supply, but if you choose to locally power it, there's some, you know, you want to stay 48 volt DC, 1.5 to 2 amps is good there. As we continue to move across the back, because this is it's a full half RU, it's a half RU device. And it has the ability to be a processor. One of the things that allows that is, you know, our processors, we always have a LAN A and a LAN B. LAN A being your primary Q-SYS LAN, and then LAN B can be for redundant networks, could be for just a simple connection to a different network. They are independent NICs in there, so just something to know about. On the USB-A ports on any of our cores, you have the ability to be able to do some speakerphone integration or an USB HID integration. So we do have the ability to do some human interface device, mouse, keyboard, things like that. We can transfer between things that are connected with the USB-B bridging port and on another device, and then USB-A ports on here. So, and then the speakerphone part is if we have the ability, if you have a USB headset, you can turn that on in the software, and you have the ability to get one microphone input in, and you get 2 channels coming out for left and right there. So one nice thing on that. Continuing across the back, we have a little bit of GPI in and a little bit of GPO output. Also, we have integrated RS-232. So remember, in the Q-SYS platform, if anywhere you see an RS-232 port, that's just a bidirectional communication, either for a third-party device to control Q-SYS, or we can configure it so that it's RS-232 to control a third-party device on the outside, and vice versa, either works. Continuing along, we have the audio out and audio in. So we've got, these are unbalanced on a 3.5 millimeter jack. I don't want to say stereo because it's not required that it's a stereo signal. So it's 2 input pins and 2 output pins when you drag it in. And then we have the USB-B for integrated AV bridging. Next along the line, we have HDMI. This is in core mode here. So this is when we start getting differential. In the core mode, we have a local 3x2 HDMI switcher. But in peripheral mode, it would either be set up as an encoder or a decoder. And we're going to dive a little bit more into that as we move along. Let's first talk about routable Q-SYS audio. So the nice thing here is I mentioned that we have the 3.5 millimeter audio in and audio out. So that's places where we see a lot of folks take these and maybe they're using it as a core and it's a 3x2 switcher and they come out of the analog audio out and go into one of our small form factor amplifiers. And then boom, they've got a small system in a box with an amplifier and everything there. You could also pair this, as well with a SPA-Q amplifier series now. But we have the analog, we have those there as well. We also have the ability on the HDMI ins and the HDMI outs to take in up to 8 PCM audio channels. It does not do any surround format decoding. Whoops, pardon me. Does not do any surround sound format decoding, but it will take 8-channel PCM. And so you'll get your left, right, center, LFE, left sides, right side, and left and right rear as well. But you won't be able to, it won't pass that surround decoding on. So it's always a good thing to check with your devices. Most modern devices I've found have the ability to be set up to do PCM out. So you also have the analog audio outs, in and outs. The nice thing about this is we can extract audio at the source and we can manipulate it. We can inject it back in before it goes out to the display. We can not send audio to the display and keep it internal. That way, people don't get the sound coming out of the TV speakers and out of the overheads and getting it out of time or anything like that. So a lot of flexibility there with the audio. When you set up an NV32H as a peripheral, so we're talking about peripherals now, and it's set up as an encoder, we have in 4K mode, what you have the ability to do is you can plug 3 4K signals into this device, but it will only stream one stream out. So it will encode up to, if you're doing 4K, it will do up to, I'm sorry, I had my slides off here. This is 1080p. So in 1080p, you can plug in 3 independent 1080p sources, and you will be able to stream all 3 of those out of the network. And this all really goes down to bandwidth of the network ports. So these are 1 gig network ports on here. And our algorithm for compression algorithm makes us send our 1080p out at about 250 megabits of bandwidth. And so if you take 3 of those, that's 750. That leaves a little other headroom in there for audio processing and whatnot. So as an encoder, that's what you have the ability to plug 3 HDMI inputs at 1080p 60 or below, and we can stream all 3 of those out of there. You also have the ability in encoder mode to have one output of 1080p locally. So now let's talk about 4K. I was a little off there. So on the 4K side, you have 3 4K inputs that can be plugged in simultaneously. But in our compression, we allow the shift processing, we call it. We allow 4K 60 content full motion video to go up to consume 750 to 800 megabits of bandwidth. So that's what limits us from being able to stream more than one of these 4K 60 signals out of the network port and out onto the network to be decoded later. Now, in encoder mode, it will also support one single local monitor source. So that is only going to be, and this is for 1080p or for 4K. This output is only going to show these local. We cannot decode a stream from the network. So just be aware of that. So now let's talk about setting it as a decoder. Now, this time we started with 4K. Each one of these NV32Hs, when it's set as a decoder, has the ability to decode a single 4K 60 signal. And so it will come in there and then it will route out. It will route out of the processor, or route out of the decoder out there, and it will be a local source on that one. Now, if we're talking about, the other thing when it's set as a decoder is you can plug in local sources here into the inputs, and they would only be available to go to this output here. So I say if you have a display in a conference room and you need to add a click share or some other type of device that's only going to be shown on that one display, maybe it's a bright sign player because you're doing some dynamic content and meeting room management or something like that. You can plug that bright sign in on the decoder on one of these inputs, and then it's not streaming over the network. And so there's some advantages to that. So let's talk about if we do NV32H set as a decoder and we're doing 1080p 60 content. We've set up that. With this, what we're allowing it to do, what the bandwidth will, because if they're up to about 250, we can bring 500 megabits of bandwidth in through the network, and they can. This is when we are able to use both HDMI 1 and HDMI 2 out on the decoder side there. Same thing as before with the 4K setup. You can plug in 3 local sources here that can be switched only to these outputs. They will not stream back through the network, but that's how that works. Thomas, do I need to break for any questions, or are you answering them primarily there? Are we good?
No, it's no questions so far.
Okay, perfect.
Keep chugging along.
All right. I think I've given this a bazillion times, so I think someone shuffled my deck though. All right, so let's talk about, so we're going back to decoder here and talking about the fact of what I was mentioning earlier. When it's set as a decoder, you do have the ability to choose one of these 3 local sources to go out to there. And then so you can bring one in, you can bring one source in from the network and stream it out, and then you can have the 3 locals. The next one, when we set it as an NV32 as a decoder and we're doing 1080p, you'll see here that we're bringing 2 streams in from the network, and then we're bringing 2 local ones in that are available to go to either one of these outputs. So you would have the choice of these 4 sources to be on either one of these 2. So the nice thing about this I mentioned earlier is that it's drag and drop programming for our video distribution. One of the things you'll see is, you'll bring our encoder in. If you software define it as an encoder, you might bring it in as a decoder. If you're over here next to Minnesota, it could be a North decoder or a South decoder. Sorry, have to throw at least one bad joke in there, so feel free to groan. But you'll see in the software, we actually have generic HDMI sources, and we have generic HDMI displays, and we wire those in, and that node tells the encoder, how to configure itself and what's going on with there. So really easy to set up. If you can drag and drop, and if you can build a DSP file, you can build a video system in our platform. The Q-SYS Shift I was referring to earlier is our proprietary video codec on the Q-SYS platform. It's network optimized, and it does adaptive video compression. So some of our competitors you can set it to 750 or 800 and then, 250 or whatever the case may be. But this actually constantly adapts depending on what the actual content is. So in this example here, you can see that, if we're sending a signal in that is, I don't want to say a spreadsheet because I've said that before, and someone pulls out a million color spreadsheet with a million cells or something, and that will do it as well. But basic data spreadsheets, basic PowerPoints, not without a lot of motion video or a lot of dynamics, they're going to only use a small amount of bandwidth. But when we ramp that up and we go into full 4K, full motion video, you're going to see that we ramp up the amount of bandwidth that we're actually going to use doing that. So this does it automatically for us. Now, there are some limitations and there are some ways to go in and say, hey, I only want to use 600 megabit. There's kind of limit some of that, and it will work that way. Now, it's optimized for the connected meeting space, video distribution and web conferencing integration with the Q-SYS cameras and Q-SYS audio all in one device. So, even in peripheral mode, if this is out at your, table, you've got the ability to bring 3 HDMI signals in. You've got your USB bridge there as well too. So, initially people looked at the price and thought, well, our competitors, encoders or decoders are, half that cost or whatever. But when you start thinking and you leverage all of the features and functions on there, it really does make a lot of sense. Simultaneous in-room streaming. So we support for emerging web applications, dual video output for content supporting web conferencing and side-by-side BYOD. That's one of the things when you start to design with it and you're designing in 1080p, one of these behind the displays and one NV32 at the table, and you've got a 3 input. Typically you have a 6 input system if everything's just going to those 2 monitors, because you use the 3 local on the that would go to either one's on the decoder, and then the encoder brings another 3 in. Just a lot of flexibility in there for that. Now, as we take a look at in core mode, a lot of very similar. In core mode, we're going to have that has all of the true Q-SYS processing capabilities and I/O capabilities. But it will also, this is great for small meeting rooms. We've seen it in higher ed, people using it. You throw it in a lectern, you use a fiber HDMI cable to go out to the projector on the decoder side, and then you with the integrated video switching, and then you've got 3 inputs there for like a local PC, a laptop connection, and maybe a document camera, and then pair that with there. So you also have you got a bridging port there, so you've got one of those inputs could be a Teams room, a Zoom room, something like that as well. So looking at the back again, same kind of configuration, except here this is a local video switcher. You can be configured for 4K 60 or 1080p. Either way, it kind of works. All of the same things that you're going to do. A smaller number of AEC channels and things like that as we start to move in there. It is a full feature DSP. It is limited to 32 by 32 network audio channels. It will do 8 AEC at 200 milliseconds of tail length. It'll do 1 VoIP instance, and it has a little bit of audio I/O via the HDMI, the 3.5s, and also through USB. And it can also do a human interface device connection over IP as well too. So going back to that example conference room, if I've got a PC in the rack that's maybe attached to an encoder or something like that, or is getting its bridging port from an encoder in the rack, I can plug in a mouse and keyboard at the USB cables at the NV at the table, and now I've extended my mouse and keyboard, and it's kind of saved a component there. So lots of interesting things with that. Q-SYS software-based architecture and process. So it does allow for additional feature licensing. So we'll see actually in 10.0, the UCI deployment and scripting will no longer be required if you've updated to 10.0, but it had the ability to be monitored by Reflect and also the software-based Dante. So you can add that in. Now, the NV32 is one of the processors that we do not include a complementary 8 channels of software-based Dante. And the reason being is we don't know when you buy that box whether it's going to be used as an encoder, a decoder, or a core. And oddly enough, Dante would like to get paid every time we include their technology in our sales as well too. So, all right, let's move on. There we go. It does enable native onboard video switch for local HDMI. So like they're showing here, a Teams room plugged in into the and then going out to 2 different displays. And then you can integrate well with plug and play soft codec. So if you need a laptop, you want to come in and do a BYOD. And we're agnostic as long as, along the lines of whether it's Zoom, Teams, Google Meet, whatever the case may be, compatible across the board there. So taking a look at a comparison side by side, you have the NV32H in core mode or in peripheral mode. So it's the differences really for core mode is that you have the ability to leverage the DSP that's in there. It does not, in core mode, it will not do network encoding and decoding. And then you have, it's a full feature control engine. You have AAC, software-based Dante. You can add up to 32 channels of that. And VoIP soft phone host as well. You have a single VoIP instance. So those are some of the differences between the two. And then we have the NV32H core mode video streaming feature license. So the video streaming feature license helps simplify some of your installations. It's a software-based expansion. Whoops, there we go. Boy, I'm new to PowerPoint today. But what it'll allow you to do is you can do a license, you can add a scaled up license for this, and it's going to allow you to be able to encode and decode or decode streams off of the network there. Thomas, do you want to expound on that just a little bit and some of the limitations or guardrails around that feature license?
Yeah, so core mode video streaming, basically what it does is it takes the NV32 and it just adds the encoder or decoder capability right onto the top of what is core mode. So in addition to, core mode, you have the 3x1 or 3x2 local video switching. It allows you to also put it into either encoder or decoder mode, one or the other, not both, so that you have the power of that encoder or decoder while still maintaining the functionality of core mode and the flexibility of AV bridging and local HDMI switching.
Now, it is true you can only encode or decode. So you can license it for one or the other, right? You can't do both.
Yeah, that's correct. You cannot do both.
It's the same, kind of the same guardrails that we have around it when it's configured as an encoder or decoder. So great, thank you for that. I appreciate it. So with lots of different scaling license, so you have ability to pay for only the features you need, expand functionality at a software level. So there is some scaling that can be done. The scripting engine, UCI deployment, those will be going away. And then you have some AV bridging feature licenses as well.
So while we're on that talking about the scaling licenses, so
sure.
We are making a change to previously the small cores. So the Core 8 Flex and the Core Nano, you could scale them with one of 2 SKUs, either the commercial AV bundle or the collaboration bundle. Those two are actually getting combined into one scaling license that is just going to be called the small core scaling license. It'll do all of the features of both the commercial and collaboration bundles, all in one SKU. And then the pricing, I think, is actually going down just a little bit for dealer cost. So to kind of match that a little bit better. It also means that with the introduction of the new cores like the Core 24 and the X10 and the X20, that now there's the small cores have a scaling license to get you up to what was previously the 110s power level. The 24 is a step up from that. The X10 is a step up from that. The X20 is a step up from that. And then the 5200 is still the top of the mountain.
The 5200 is still the 5200. it's the big one. Yeah. And Kevin will tell you if you spec a 5200, don't put a 510 in. Churchill. So, but we made it work. Cool. Right. Thanks for that. I appreciate that. Thomas is one of our field application engineers. So he's dealing with all of our new products all of the time. So he's a little more familiar with some of the common questions and things that come up. And it's why I asked him to join and ride along with us on this. So appreciate that, Thomas. So yeah, simple deployment. You deploy, you add your licenses on just like you would with any of your other. And then let's talk. And so same kind of thing. Installation simplified, simple deployment. Let's talk about the NV21. So another network video endpoint. We started with the NV32 as first product released. And then folks were looking for a little smaller form factor, a little more cost efficient. And that's what we came up with. So it's a single cable solution. So you'll notice that it only had, we have the ability to do a single cable solution. So a USB-C connection could be also your bridging and your video as well. Maximizes flexibility. This can be set up as an encoder or a decoder. It's definitely right-sized. It's a little bit smaller than a half-rack U. And so it can be, hides a little better behind the display and things like that. You can see it's a little bit thinner. And it was designed to work with Q-SYS, so that makes it even more awesome right there. Taking a look at the back, we do have auxiliary power. You'll notice there that it's 12 volt, DC, 8 amps. Now, the reason it's 8 amps is because if you are powering it with a local power supply and not powering it with PoE, it will also charge a laptop. So the local power supply is like one of those gaming laptop bricks. It's huge, or one of the old gaming laptop bricks. I mean, it's massive. But as we move across the back plane here, PoE, so the LAN port does do PoE. It is PoE type 3, so it's looking for 60 watts. You want to make sure of that. USB-A port for service on the back there. We have an RS-232 connection. We also have USB-C port there I mentioned earlier, which could be doing up to 4K 60 video, also AV bridging and device charging if you have the auxiliary power supply. If it's just powered on PoE, it will not do any device charging there. And then you have an additional HDMI input there coming in. So that's your 2. The naming conventions, by the way, NV network video. If we go 32, that's 3 input, 2 output, and then -H HDMI. Here with the NV21, we have network video, 2 inputs, 1 output, HDMI and USB. So yeah, our part names do make some sense there. So
one last thing on the connections on the back, and also a question I'll answer here in a moment. So that USB-A port, in a recent update, I believe it was 9.12, we actually added the ability to use that USB-A port as a standard KVM or HID bridging port, like we can do with the other core modes, other core capable devices. The NV21 is not core capable. I know I just put that in my mouth and then had to spit it back out. There are Mariano asked how many watts of power. It's 60 watts over the USB-C connection. So that's 60 watts is enough to drive. A lot of laptops will charge off of that. Some laptops, if you've got, a particularly beefy gaming laptop, anything that requires more than 60 watts will usually trickle charge. But it's enough to keep you going. And then, for, your standard, your iPads, your iPhones, small laptops like MacBooks will just straight up charge off of that connection. And then William asked why the power supply voltages for the NV21 and the NV32 are different. The reason for that, William, is that the NV21 is meant to be a super small form factor. So bringing that in at the 48 volts of the NV32 would require us to have a step down transformer inside of the box, which would make the NV21 much larger. So we opted to bring it in at 12 volt, where the step down requirements are a lot smaller. We can use smaller step downs and deliver voltage where it needs to be. With a lot less footprint.
Cool.
That's a great question, actually.
Yeah, that is a good one. I think I learned something too. It's one of the reasons I like to have you guys on to help me, and even sometimes you learn things from the people out there as well. So, So let's talk about the single, we talked about before, single cable solution, one connection for video distribution and bridging. You have the ability there to end device charging if need be. Software definable, so it could be an encoder, could be a decoder. Spend less time looking for your adapters. I don't know what that statement's all about there, but okay, marketing. Anyways, design flexibility. So when you're in HDMI mode, the HDMI input receives video content up to 4K 444. The USB-C connector will bridge the Q-SYS camera and audio feeds and charge the connected device. The HDMI output can be connected to a monitor for a preview, so it will show video from the HDMI output when you're in encoder mode. USB-C mode, the USB-C connector will receive alternate mode DisplayPort video up to 4K 60 and bridges the Q-SYS cameras and audio feeds and everything else to the connected device. The HDMI output can be connected to a monitor for preview. So just like in the NV32, that local monitor is local only. It's not going to be it's not going to take a stream off the network. So, and then when we go into decoder mode, the HDMI output can show network content, right? So it's going to bring a stream in from the network. And then you have the ability here to, when you're in decoder mode, to be able to have one monitor out, and then you could have local connections, and HDMI and USB-C can be separated like that. Or you can do USB-C, you can connect in, and that will be a local output as well too. So you can, it will be a local source for the output in decoder mode. You can see that it's a little bit smaller form factor, also has a little less functionality in it, as you would expect with the smaller form factor as well. So, all right, the NV-1-H-WE. Well, let's get out my secret Q-SYS decoder ring. So that's a network video device, right? It is has one input, and it's an HDMI, and it is a WE, which is wall encoder. It's a single channel HDMI wall plate encoder. It's not software definable as encoder or decoder. It's optimized for spaces where traditional surface mount enclosures are not ideal, including flexible, divisible spaces or reconfigurable furniture. As a native Q-SYS component, it seamlessly will integrate. It's definitely flexible and scalable. It extends the NV series portfolio to enable your designers to customize and optimize their systems. Now, this is a 802.3AT Type 2 Class 4 PoE. So 30 watts from power supply, 25.5 watts at the NV1H power input required. So also, you'll notice it's down here in small letters. There is a black conversion kit available. So if you don't want the white faceplate in front, it will go as a black as well. When we start to look at being just flexible and scalable across the board, and you look at all of them now, a couple things. Let me go back on the NVWE. Wall encoder that is purposefully named. If you look at the specifications and you read about this, for dissipation of heat, we're suggesting that it only be installed in a wall, right? Because you start putting it into a floor box and you put a lid over that floor box, it could build up heat and all that. So we are rating it only to be a wall type enclosure with access for air to flow through these inputs on there as well too. Also, the other question that comes up is, is there plans, is there a roadmap to do a decoder version? Yes, and it may be a wall plate. It may be it is definitely on the roadmap. I don't have any additional details at this time, but it will probably be one of the next things that will come out of this product line. But when we start looking across the whole board, with the NV32, it can be your core as well. And then, if you added that streaming license when it's in core capable, you might stream in or stream out from the NV1H WE, or it could be in or out, or it could be in from the NV1, or it could be in or out from the NV21 there. Lots of different things across the board there, a lot of flexibility. designed for Q-SYS, right? So it's Q-SYS being cloud manageable audio video control platform. We're building this for the future. It's driven and managed by the Q-SYS OS, so a single software. That's something that, having been, I'm kind of taken for granted now being at Q-SYS for almost 8 years, is that, when you want to do, when you want to build a user interface, you open up Q-SYS Designer software. You want to do the audio portion, you do Q-SYS Design. Everything's in one software. It really makes it easier to work with that way. The NV21U is designed to work natively alongside a comprehensive portfolio of products, along with the NV1 as well. So if you start looking at a couple of example systems and rooms here, here's a simple installation. I think I was mentioning before, we have in the credenza, we have a standard network switch. We have an NV32 that's working as in core mode with a decoder streaming license, and so it's a decoder with a streaming license as well, or it's set up as a decoder in here. And then you've got an installed PC, and you've got a wireless presentation receiver coming in as inputs into this, which are going to be local outputs on here. And then you have a SPA series amplifiers that's going to be coming out of the analog outputs out of that. And then you have one NV21 as an encoder out at the table that can do HDMI or USB bridging as well. And that's coming in over the network and coming in. So that's where you would have that one streaming license. So it would be a decoder stream. You would be setting it up as a decoder in the streaming license. It will receive one stream. So you'll notice we have 2 of these NV21 encoders in this design. And this will allow, since you only have a single display, you only can bring one stream in, that works quite well. We have one of our Q-TSC touch panels in here, the NMT1, which is network microphone tabletop version #1 in there. And we've got a pair of our cameras and our column line array speakers. So here's a small, simple installation, easy to put together. When you start looking at, larger spaces, you may move up and move into a Core Nano and have a dedicated processor. It's going to be a little bit more processing under the hood there for that. The Core Nano, and then we've got maybe a CX series network amplifier, because we're doing with, we've got both column line array speakers, plus we have maybe several channels in this training room of loudspeakers, right? So we may want to do some voice lift to the back of the room. And we can do that if we've got multiple channels that we can do this with. If it's a 4-channel, we might have channels for the front row, middle, and then the back, or something like that. You've got it in the equipment rack. We've got an installed PC in there that has a dual output capability. And then we have the ability here to do, also in the rack, we have a cable box coming in as an encoder source as well too. So a couple different options there on encoding. And then once we get out into the room at the projector, you'll see there's an NV21 set up as a decoder. And then you might there's a side display over here with another NV21 set up as a decoder. So kind of allowing for a lot of flexibility in this room. So a confidence monitor towards the back, primary display here, 2 cameras in the front to capture, better what's going on in the classroom space, and then a camera at the back of the room to capture the trainer and things like that. Restaurant, hospitality, things like that. This is where, you may put in a pair of NV32s with a Core 8 Flex. You may need some analog audio in and out in this system. But yeah, you've got a half a dozen satellite receivers coming into this system, and then they're able to stream out to the NV21 decoders across the room. Around the space, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 decoders out here. You'll notice we've got one of our CX series, Q-SYS amplifiers, because we're doing multiple different zones of audio or different loudspeaker areas. And then adding in maybe at the hostess stand or the office or the bar or something in there, you may have an NV1 HWE, so we could put a wall encoder in there to be able to add some video to any one of these displays with a local source too. So anyways, that kind of takes us through the NV21 just as a high level as well. There is a whole training out there on We do have a quantum series training on just video in general and kind of how video streaming works and functions. So I encourage you to do that as well. So if there's any questions, we're happy to stick around here. We're right at the 10:45 mark. We like to give you a few minutes. If you've got any questions, we're happy to entertain them. If not, we'll gladly give you 15 minutes back because I know there's a couple of deep dives that go a little bit long. So
yeah, and while I'm thinking about it, one feature that we brought in 10.0 that did not get talked about much at Activate or at Infocom is we added a component to the NV32 called the MediaCast output. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to take the stream that's coming off of HDMI 1 and it gives you a preview panel inside of Q-SYS Designer that can be sent out to a touch panel. It's only available inside of Q-SYS. It can't be sent other places, but it does give you the ability to put that stream preview up on the touch panel for, you know, a confidence monitor at a lectern or something like that.
nice. Wow, that's a great feature for sure.
All right. Let's see. Will the NV21 ever have the ability to decode the MediaCast stream? That is something that we are looking to bring to the NV21. So right now, the NV32, if you want to take a camera stream and output it over HDMI 1, the NV32 is the only product that can do that. But, you know, as I mentioned with the USB input originally, you know, Dan was correct when we originally launched that product. The USB-A port was just a service port, but we're able to add functionality to that as well. And like the NV32, we're going to continue to try and add features to the NV21 and if possible, the NV1. I don't know how much we'll be able to add to it since it is just an encoder, but we're going to continue to try and add software features and develop the software platform as we bring more stuff to it. So yeah, keep a lookout for MediaCast decoding to the NV21 in the future.
Yeah, the USB-C wall plate, Mariano, would make some sense. So that may be something that's out there on the roadmap. You know, we may do a decoder first, small form factor decoder, then come back and address that. So I'm sure that's definitely something that's on the roadmap. And I don't know that it's definitely on the roadmap, but it definitely makes sense to be. I think we agree with that. Also, though, there's a last question. Yes, this session, you'll get a recording of this session in the next week. And there is no real placemat or guide for this one. We have that for the AEC, best practices in AEC and the best practices in gain structure. It's a little two-sided document that we send out. But you'll get a PDF version of this slide deck and everything else with it. So we appreciate everybody's time. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Some good ones next month as well. So we look forward to seeing you then. Have a good one. Thank you.